The perfect morning. Rebecca Walsh stood before the floor-length mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection showing a woman who looked ready for her fairy tale ending. The ivory silk gown hugged her frame perfectly, with delicate pearl beading that caught the morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Her auburn hair was styled in soft waves, cascading over her shoulders, and her hazel eyes sparkled with what everyone assumed was happiness. But Rebecca knew better. Deep inside, beneath the layers of lace and the practiced smile, something felt wrong. She had ignored that feeling for months, pushing it down every time it threatened to surface. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She was marrying Derek Ashford, a successful investment banker who had swept her off her feet with expensive dinners, weekend getaways to Martha's Vineyard, and promises of a secure future. Hannah Mitchell, her best friend since elementary school, adjusted the cathedral-length veil with careful fingers. Hannah wore a sage-green bridesmaid dress that complemented her dark skin and brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. "You look absolutely stunning, Becca," Hannah said softly, but there was a question in her voice that Rebecca had heard before. "Thank you," Rebecca replied, forcing brightness into her tone that she did not feel. Hannah hesitated, then placed a gentle hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "You know you can still change your mind, right? Nobody would judge you. Not me, not your family, not anyone who truly loves you." Rebecca turned to face her friend, surprised by the sudden honesty. "What are you talking about?" "I'm fine. Everything is fine." "Is it though?" Hannah's eyes searched Rebecca's face. "Because the Becca I know, the girl who rescued stray cats and cried during animated movies, the woman who chose to teach kindergarten because she wanted to make a difference in children's lives, that person would not settle for fine. She would want extraordinary." The ceremony begins. Before Rebecca could respond, there was a knock at the door. The wedding coordinator, a efficient woman named Gloria, peeked her head inside. "It is time, ladies. Everyone is seated and waiting." Rebecca took a deep breath, pushing down the doubts that Hannah's words had stirred up. She had made her choice. Derek was stable, successful, and wanted to marry her. That was enough. It had to be enough. The walk down the aisle felt surreal. St. Patrick's Cathedral was packed with guests, nearly 300 people who had come to witness her marriage to Derek Ashford. The organ music swelled, filling the massive space with traditional wedding melodies. Rebecca gripped her bouquet of white roses and calla lilies so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Derek stood at the altar in his custom-tailored tuxedo, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes fixed on her with an expression she could not quite read. Was it love? Possession? She was not sure anymore. Her father, Thomas Walsh, walked beside her, his arm linked with hers. He was a retired firefighter, a man of few words but deep emotions. Rebecca could feel tension in his grip, and she wondered if he too had doubts he had not voiced. They reached the altar. Her father lifted her veil and kissed her cheek, whispering, "I love you, sweetheart. Always remember that." The words felt heavy, loaded with meaning she did not have time to decipher. Father Michael, the priest who had known Rebecca's family for decades, opened his prayer book and began the ceremony. His voice echoed through the cathedral, familiar words about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Rebecca barely heard him. Her mind was spinning, racing through memories she had tried to forget. Memories of another man, another time, when love had felt like breathing instead of suffocating. The doors burst open. "If anyone has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." The traditional words hung in the air. In all the weddings Rebecca had attended, nobody had ever actually objected. It was just a formality, a relic from older times. Then the cathedral doors exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Every head turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rebecca's heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. A man strode down the aisle with absolute confidence, flanked by two people in dark suits who screamed federal agents. He was tall, with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, sharp green eyes that had haunted Rebecca's dreams for 7 years, and a presence that commanded every bit of attention in the room. Julian Pierce. The name hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Julian Pierce, her first love. Julian Pierce, the brilliant computer science major she had dated throughout college. Julian Pierce, who had broken her heart when he suddenly left Boston 7 years ago to pursue his startup in Silicon Valley, choosing his dreams over their relationship. Except now he was not just any tech entrepreneur. He was Julian Pierce, the billionaire founder of NextGen Technologies, one of the most innovative software companies in the world. His face had been on magazine covers, featured in business news, discussed in economic forums. And he was here, at her wedding, stopping everything. "Rebecca, do not marry him," Julian's voice rang out clear and strong, filling the cathedral with urgency. "Derek Ashford is not who you think he is." Derek's face transformed in an instant. The charming smile vanished, replaced by cold fury. "Security! Remove this man immediately." But Julian did not move. The 2 agents beside him pulled out badges. "FBI," the woman announced. "Nobody move. Derek Ashford, you are under investigation for money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. This wedding cannot proceed." The cathedral erupted into chaos. Guests shouted questions. Derek's family members stood up in protest. Camera phones appeared despite the no photography rule. Rebecca stood frozen at the altar, her world tilting sideways. She looked at Derek, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The careful mask he had worn for months had cracked, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Then she looked at Julian, and her breath caught. He was staring at her with an intensity that burned, with 7 years of unspoken words written across his face. "Rebecca," he said, and his voice was gentler now, meant only for her despite the crowd. "I know this is crazy. I know you probably hate me. But you need to hear the truth before you make the biggest mistake of your life." Hannah appeared beside Rebecca, taking her arm. "Come on, honey. Let's get you somewhere quiet." But Rebecca shook her head. Years of being polite, of not making scenes, of following expectations, suddenly seemed absurd. She had spent 7 years trying to move past Julian Pierce, trying to build a safe, predictable life that would not shatter her heart again. And in one moment, he had destroyed all of that careful construction. "Talk," Rebecca said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in her hands. "You have 5 minutes to explain why you just destroyed my wedding." Julian's expression shifted, relief mixing with determination. "I need more than 5 minutes. But I will start with this: Derek Ashford specifically targeted you. He researched your background, your connection to me, and planned this entire relationship. You were never his fiancée, Rebecca. You were his insurance policy." The words hit like bullets. Rebecca felt her knees weaken, but Hannah's grip kept her upright. "You are lying," Derek snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. He was already looking for exits, calculating his escape. The male FBI agent stepped forward. "Mr. Ashford, we have 6 months of documentation proving you have been using shell companies to launder money for several international crime syndicates. We have wiretaps, financial records, and testimony from 3 witnesses. Your connection to Rebecca Walsh was flagged because of her relationship with Mr. Pierce, whose company has been assisting our cybercrimes division." Rebecca's head spun. Nothing made sense. The man she had agreed to marry was a criminal. The man she had loved and lost had become someone she barely recognized. And somehow, her quiet life as a kindergarten teacher had become tangled in something far beyond her understanding. "I need to sit down," she whispered. Julian moved toward her instinctively, but Rebecca held up her hand. "No. You stay there. Hannah, please." Her best friend guided her to the front pew while chaos continued to swirl around them. Derek was arguing with the FBI agents, his lawyer father was making angry phone calls, and guests were demanding answers nobody seemed willing to provide. Through it all, Rebecca kept her eyes on Julian. He stood in the center of the storm, calm and focused, watching her with an expression that made her heart ache. 7 years ago, he had left her behind to chase his dreams. Now he had returned, crashing through her carefully rebuilt life like a wrecking ball. And despite everything, despite the shock and confusion and anger, a tiny voice in the back of Rebecca's mind whispered a truth she had tried to deny for years. She had never stopped loving him, the safe house. 2 hours after the cathedral chaos, Rebecca found herself in a downtown Boston apartment she had never seen before. The space was modern and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. FBI agents moved efficiently through the rooms, setting up equipment and speaking in low voices into their phones. Rebecca sat on a gray leather couch, still wearing her wedding dress, feeling like an actress trapped in someone else's movie. Hannah sat beside her, holding her hand, while Julian stood across the room speaking with the female FBI agent who had helped interrupt the ceremony. "I still cannot believe this is happening," Rebecca murmured, more to herself than to Hannah. "This morning I was getting married. Now I am in a safe house because my fiancé is a criminal." Hannah squeezed her hand. "Ex-fiancé. And honestly, I never liked Derek. He always seemed too polished, too perfect. Like he was performing instead of being real. Why did you not say anything?" "I did," Hannah reminded her gently. "Multiple times. But you were determined to move on from Julian, and Derek represented everything opposite to what you had before. Stable. Predictable. Safe." Rebecca laughed bitterly. "Turns out he was none of those things." The male FBI agent approached them, holding a tablet. He was in his early 40s with sandy hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. "Ms. Walsh, I am Agent Brandon Cole. I apologize for the dramatic interruption, but we had credible intelligence that Derek Ashford was planning to accelerate his timeline. The wedding was the perfect cover for several international transfers he had scheduled for today." "I do not understand," Rebecca said, her voice tired. "Why me? What could I possibly offer someone like Derek?" Agent Cole glanced at Julian, who had finished his conversation and was walking over. "Perhaps Mr. Pierce should explain. This is as much his investigation as ours." Julian sat in the chair across from the couch, maintaining a respectful distance. Up close, Rebecca could see the changes 7 years had carved into him. He was leaner, harder somehow, with faint lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. But those green eyes were the same ones that had looked at her with love during late-night study sessions and lazy Sunday mornings. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low and careful. 3 years ago, NextGen Technologies was approached by the FBI to help develop software that could track complex financial crimes across international borders. We created an algorithm that could identify patterns in money laundering operations. About 18 months ago, our system flagged Derek Ashford. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. As we dug deeper, we discovered he was not just a corrupt banker. He was a facilitator for multiple criminal organizations. He moved their money, cleaned it, invested it, made it legitimate. And he was very, very good at it. What does this have to do with me? Rebecca asked, though part of her was beginning to understand. The connection. Julian's expression grew pained. Derek knew that if he ever got caught, he needed leverage. Something that would make authorities hesitate or give him negotiating power. So he researched everyone connected to the investigation. When he found out I was involved, he started looking into my past. And found me, Rebecca finished, the pieces clicking into place. Yes. He discovered our relationship, learned everything about you. Your job, your routines, your favorite coffee shop. Then he engineered a meeting that seemed completely accidental. Rebecca's mind flashed back to 8 months ago. She had been at a charity fundraiser for the public school system, representing her kindergarten class. Derek had approached her at the refreshment table, charming and attentive, asking intelligent questions about her work. He had seemed genuinely interested in education reform. It had all been a lie. He calculated that if things went wrong, having a connection to you would give him leverage over me, Julian continued. If he could marry you, even better. Spousal privilege, shared assets, legal complications. Plus, he assumed I would back off the investigation if you were involved. That is sick, Hannah said, her voice sharp with anger. He used her like a chess piece. Agent Cole nodded. Mr. Ashford is a sociopath, Ms. Mitchell. Everything he does is calculated. Every relationship is transactional. Rebecca felt nausea rising. Did he ever care about me at all? Even a little? Julian's jaw tightened. No. I am sorry, Rebecca, but no. We have recordings of him discussing you with his associates. You were always just part of the plan. The words should have hurt more than they did. But truthfully, Rebecca had never felt truly loved by Derek. She had felt pursued, courted, valued for what she represented. But loved? No. She recognized that now. Why did you wait until today? Rebecca asked Julian, her voice gaining strength. If you knew about this for months, why let it get all the way to the wedding? Julian's confession. Julian stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because I am a coward. Because watching you with him, seeing you build a life that did not include me, it was killing me. But I told myself you were happy, that I had no right to interfere after I left you. He turned to face her, and Rebecca saw pain etched into every line of his face. I left Boston 7 years ago because my startup was failing. I was drowning in debt, watching my dream collapse, and I could not stand the thought of dragging you down with me. You deserved someone who could give you stability, security, a future. So I made the decision for both of us and left. You broke my heart, Rebecca said quietly. I know. And I have regretted it every single day since. Julian's hands clenched at his sides. But I threw myself into rebuilding the company. I worked 18-hour days, made impossible decisions, sacrificed everything personal for success. And it worked. NextGen became profitable, then valuable, then industry-leading. I became everything I thought you deserved. He took a step closer. But by then, you had moved on. You were living your life, teaching your students, being happy. I had no right to come back and disrupt that. So I stayed away, even though it hurt. Even though I never stopped thinking about you. Until Derek, Rebecca said. Until Derek, Julian agreed. When I realized he was using you, that you were in danger, I could not stay away anymore. Agent Cole and I pushed for an earlier arrest, but the FBI needed more evidence to make charges stick. They were building a case that would take down Derek's entire network, not just him. Agent Cole stepped forward. We were planning to arrest him next month. But then Derek moved up the wedding date suddenly, and we intercepted communications suggesting he was planning to disappear after the ceremony. We had to act. Patricia's warning. A door opened, and a woman in her 50s entered the room. She had gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore a severe black suit. Her face was lined with stress and something that looked like guilt. This is Patricia Ashford, Agent Cole introduced. Derek's aunt and former business partner. She has been cooperating with our investigation. Patricia's eyes found Rebecca, and they filled with tears. My dear, I am so sorry. I should have warned you sooner, but I was afraid. Derek is dangerous when cornered, and I have a daughter to protect. She sat down heavily in a nearby chair. I worked with my nephew for 5 years before I understood what he was really doing. By then, I was already implicated. He made sure of it, forged documents with my signature, created trails that would lead back to me if anyone investigated. I was trapped. Why come forward now? Rebecca asked. Because I could not let him ruin an innocent person's life, Patricia said firmly. When he told me his plan to marry you, to use you as insurance, I knew I had to act. I contacted the FBI and offered to cooperate in exchange for immunity and protection for my family. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, handing it to Rebecca. These are documents Derek kept. Communications, plans, even psychological profiles he had created about you. He studied you like a scientist studying a specimen. It is chilling. Rebecca opened the folder with trembling hands. The first page showed a photograph of her taken without her knowledge, walking into her school. Beneath it were notes: subject displays high empathy, strong sense of duty, conflict-averse personality. Ideal for manipulation. Connection to Julian Pierce confirmed. She flipped through more pages, each one revealing how thoroughly Derek had researched her life. Her daily routines, her friends, her family, her past relationship with Julian. Everything documented and analyzed. He was hunting me, Rebecca whispered. Hannah wrapped an arm around her shoulders. But he did not win. You are safe now. The confrontation. A commotion at the door made everyone turn. Derek Ashford stood in the hallway, flanked by 2 FBI agents. He was in handcuffs, his expensive tuxedo rumpled, his perfect hair disheveled. But his eyes were alert and calculating. I have a right to speak with my fiancée, he demanded. Ex-fiancée, Agent Cole corrected. And Ms. Walsh has no obligation to speak with you. But Rebecca stood up. Something inside her had shifted during the past 2 hours. The woman who had walked down the aisle that morning, afraid to make waves and desperate to please, was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Let him in, she said. I want to hear what he has to say. Julian started to protest, but Rebecca held up her hand. I need to do this. The agents brought Derek into the room but kept him restrained and at a distance. He looked at Rebecca with an expression that might have been regret on someone capable of genuine emotion. Rebecca, you have to understand, he began, his voice smooth despite the circumstances. Everything got complicated. Yes, I knew about your connection to Julian. Yes, I used that information initially. But I did develop feelings for you. Real feelings. Stop, Rebecca said, her voice cold. I have seen your files, Derek. I have read your notes. I was never a person to you. I was a strategy. Derek's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the coldness underneath. You were going to have a good life. Wealth, status, security. Is that really so terrible? Yes, Rebecca said simply. Because it would have been built on lies. Because you saw me as a tool, not a partner. Because you are incapable of love, and I deserve better than that. She took a step closer, drawing strength from her anger. I spent 7 years trying to build a safe, predictable life because I was afraid of getting hurt again. I chose you because you seemed like the opposite of risk. But you know what? I would rather have my heart broken honestly than live a comfortable lie. Derek's face hardened. You will regret this. You and your precious Julian. I have lawyers, connections, resources you cannot imagine. And we have evidence, Agent Cole interjected. 18 months of documented crimes. Testimony from multiple witnesses, including your aunt. Financial records that prove everything. You are done, Mr. Ashford. Moment of truth. Derek was led away, still making threats that rang hollow in the face of overwhelming evidence. The room fell silent after he left. Rebecca turned to Julian, who had been watching the confrontation with an expression of fierce pride. You said you never stopped thinking about me. Not once, Julian confirmed, taking a cautious step toward her. And you stayed away because you thought I was happy. You deserve to be happy, even if it was not with me. Rebecca shook her head slowly. That was not your choice to make, Julian. 7 years ago, you decided what was best for me without asking. You broke my heart because you thought you were protecting me. Rebecca, I am not finished, she interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. Today, you crashed my wedding and exposed Derek's crimes. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. But you also made another choice for me. You decided when and how I would learn the truth. Julian's face fell. You are right. I keep trying to protect you, but I am really just taking away your agency. I am sorry. Thank you, Rebecca said quietly. I need you to understand something. I am not the girl you left in Boston 7 years ago. I have grown. I have learned to stand on my own. I have built a life I am proud of, teaching children and making a difference in small but meaningful ways. She walked closer to him, looking up into those green eyes that had haunted her dreams. If we are going to have any kind of relationship, friendship or otherwise, it has to be between equals. No more grand gestures without my input. No more decisions made for my own good. I get a voice. I get a choice. Julian nodded, his throat working. I understand. And Rebecca, for what it is worth, I never thought of you as anything less than my equal. You were always stronger than me, braver than me. I was the one who ran away when things got hard. Yes, you were, Rebecca agreed. But you also spent years building something remarkable. You created a company that changes lives. You helped the FBI stop criminals. You grew into someone impressive. She smiled slightly. I just wish you had trusted me enough to grow together instead of apart. If I could go back and change it, I would, Julian said softly. But I cannot. All I can do is promise that if you give me another chance, any kind of chance, I will never make that mistake again. 6 weeks later. Rebecca stood in front of her kindergarten classroom, watching her students work on art projects. 5-year-olds covered in paint and glitter, creating masterpieces that would proudly grace refrigerators across Boston. This was her world, colorful and chaotic and full of innocent joy. Ms. Walsh, look. A little girl named Emma held up a painting of what might have been a rainbow or possibly a dinosaur. With kindergarten art, interpretation was everything. That is beautiful, Emma, Rebecca said warmly. Tell me about it. As Emma launched into an elaborate story involving princesses and dragons, Rebecca felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She ignored it, focusing on her student. The past 6 weeks had taught her many things, but the most important was being present in the moment instead of constantly worrying about the future. Derek was in jail awaiting trial. The FBI had built an airtight case with Patricia's testimony and the evidence NextGen software had uncovered. Rebecca had given her statement and then firmly closed that chapter of her life. Julian had respected her request for space. He had not called or texted constantly. Instead, he had sent thoughtful messages every few days, sharing articles about education reform he thought she would find interesting, or photos of sunrises that reminded him of lazy Sunday mornings they had once shared. They had met for coffee twice, in public places, having careful conversations that avoided both the painful past and the uncertain future. Relearning each other as the people they had become. It was slow. It was cautious. But it felt right. Hannah's advice. You are glowing, Hannah observed later that evening. They were at their favorite Italian restaurant, sharing pasta and wine like they had done countless times over the years. I am not glowing, Rebecca protested, but she smiled. I am just content. That is glowing, Hannah insisted. You know what I think? I think almost marrying a sociopath and getting rescued by your billionaire ex-boyfriend was the best thing that could have happened to you. Hannah. I am serious, her friend continued. You spent 7 years playing it safe, building walls, avoiding risk. Derek was the ultimate safe choice, except he turned out to be a nightmare. But that whole disaster forced you to face what you really want. Rebecca twirled pasta on her fork, considering. And what do I really want? That is the question only you can answer, Hannah said. But I have known you since we were 7 years old. I have seen you truly happy exactly twice. Once, when you graduated with your teaching degree and got your first classroom. And second, when you were with Julian in college. That was a long time ago. Was it though? Because when he looks at you now, Becca, it is the same way he looked at you then. Like you hung the moon and stars just for him. Rebecca's phone buzzed again. This time she checked it and smiled. Julian's message read, "There is a meteor shower tonight. Supposed to be the best one this year. I know a place on the coast with perfect viewing. No pressure, just thought you might want to see it. I will bring hot chocolate." Hannah, reading over her shoulder, laughed. See? The man remembers you love meteor showers. He is trying. He is, Rebecca agreed, typing a response. Which is why I am going to say yes. The beach. 2 hours later, Rebecca found herself on a quiet beach north of the city. Julian had set up blankets and portable chairs, along with a thermos of hot chocolate that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, just how she liked it. He stood when he saw her approaching, hands in his jacket pockets, looking nervous in a way that made him seem younger. "You came." "I said I would," Rebecca replied, accepting the mug of hot chocolate he offered. "Besides, you remembered about the meteor showers. I used to drag you to these all the time in college." "You did," Julian agreed, settling onto one of the blankets. "I pretended to care about astronomy, but really I just wanted to spend time with you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky. The stars were brilliant out here, away from the city lights. Rebecca had forgotten how beautiful the universe could be when you took time to look up. "Can I ask you something?" Julian said eventually. "Of course. Are you okay? Really okay? I know the past 6 weeks have been intense." Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I am better than okay, actually. Finding out about Derek was horrible, but it also freed me from something I did not even realize was trapping me. I was so focused on building a safe life that I forgot to build a joyful one. And now? Now I am remembering what joy feels like," she said, turning to look at him. "I wake up excited to teach my students. I have started taking photography again, something I gave up years ago. I am saying yes to things that scare me, like coming here tonight." "I scare you?" Julian asked, sounding hurt. "Terrify me," Rebecca admitted. "Because I know if I let myself fall for you again, it will be completely. And that kind of love, that all-in, soul-deep connection, it is the scariest thing in the world. Especially when it ended badly before." The conversation they needed. Julian set down his mug and turned to face her fully. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something. After I left Boston, after I threw myself into work and built NextGen into what it is today, I dated other people. I tried to move on. But none of them were you." He took a breath. "None of them understood why I would work 16 hours straight when inspiration struck. None of them laughed at my terrible jokes the way you did. None of them challenged me to be better or called me out when I was being ridiculous. None of them were my best friend before they were anything else." Julian. "Wait, let me finish," he requested. "When I found out Derek was targeting you, I told myself I was just protecting someone I once cared about. But that was a lie. The truth is, I never stopped being in love with you. Not for one day, not for 1 minute. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. You are the voice in my head that tells me when I am making a mistake. You are home, Rebecca. You always have been. Rebecca felt tears prickling her eyes. That is beautiful and terrifying. I know, Julian said with a small smile. So here is my promise. I will not rush you. I will not make grand gestures without asking first. I will respect your boundaries and your need for space. But I will also be honest about what I want. Which is everything, he said simply. I want lazy Sunday mornings and Wednesday night dinners. I want to hear about your students and share my work frustrations. I want to support your dreams and have you challenge mine. I want to build something together, whatever that looks like. But only if you want it too. A meteor streaked across the sky, brilliant and brief. Then another, and another, until the heavens seemed to be putting on a show just for them. Rebecca watched the celestial display and thought about fate, about choices, about second chances. She thought about the girl she had been 7 years ago, heartbroken and lost. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and independent and capable of standing alone. And she thought about what it might mean to choose to stand with someone instead. I am not the same person I was, she said finally. I have different priorities now. My students come first. My career is important to me. I will not give up my life to fit into yours. I would never ask you to, Julian assured her. Your dedication to teaching is one of the things I admire most about you. And I need to know that if things get hard, you will not run again. We face problems together or not at all. Together, Julian agreed immediately. Always together. The answer. Rebecca took a deep breath, making a choice that felt both terrifying and exactly right. Okay. Julian blinked. Okay? Okay, let us try this, she clarified. Slowly, carefully, with open communication and mutual respect. No guarantees about where it leads, but I am willing to see. The smile that broke across Julian's face was brighter than any meteor. Really? Really, Rebecca confirmed, and then laughed as he pulled her into a hug that lifted her off the ground. I will not mess this up, he promised, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. I swear, Rebecca, I will spend every day proving I deserve this second chance. You better, she said, but she was smiling too. They settled back on the blanket, this time close enough that their shoulders touched. The meteor shower continued, painting streaks of light across the darkness. Tell me about your students, Julian requested. I want to hear everything. So Rebecca did. She told him about Emma's elaborate stories and Jacob's obsession with dinosaurs. She told him about lesson plans and parent conferences and the small miracles that happened every day in her classroom. And Julian listened with genuine interest, asking questions, remembering details. This was different from before, she realized. They were different. Older, wiser, more aware of what they had almost lost. 6 months later. The sun was setting over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Rebecca stood on the rooftop terrace of Julian's downtown apartment, looking out at the city she loved. Inside, voices and laughter drifted through the open door. Julian was hosting a dinner party, something that had become a regular occurrence. Hannah was there with her new girlfriend, Agent Brandon Cole, and his wife, Patricia Ashford, and her daughter, and several of Rebecca's fellow teachers. Two worlds coming together, blending seamlessly. There you are, Julian said, stepping onto the terrace. He wore jeans and a casual button-down shirt, his tie discarded hours ago. People are asking where you disappeared to. Just needed a moment, Rebecca said. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. Julian wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. Good unbelievable or bad unbelievable? Good, she assured him. Definitely good. They had taken it slow, just as promised. Regular dates, honest conversations, meeting each other's friends and families. Julian had visited her classroom and watched her teach, seeing firsthand the passion she brought to her work. Rebecca had toured NextGen's offices, understanding better the company he had built and the lives it touched. They had argued, too. Real arguments about real things, like how much time Julian spent working or Rebecca's tendency to avoid difficult conversations. But they had learned to fight fair, to listen, to compromise. 3 months ago, Rebecca had given up her apartment and moved in with Julian. Not because of pressure, but because waking up next to him every morning felt like coming home. "I have something for you," Julian said now, pulling back slightly. Rebecca turned to face him and her breath caught. He was holding a small velvet box. "Before you panic," he said quickly, "this is not a proposal. I mean, it is, but not that kind. Not yet. We agreed we would talk about that when we were both ready, and I respect that." He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold necklace with a small compass pendant. "This is a promise. North, south, east, west, wherever life takes us, we navigate it together. No more running. No more making decisions alone. We are partners." Rebecca felt tears sliding down her cheeks as Julian fastened the necklace around her neck. "It is perfect. There is one more thing," Julian said, and now he did kneel down on one knee. Rebecca's heart stopped. "Julian, what?" "I am not proposing marriage," he interrupted gently. "Not yet. But I am proposing a future. I am asking if you can see yourself building a life with me. Real partnership, real commitment, with all the messy, complicated, beautiful reality that entails. And if you can, then someday, when we are both ready, I would like to ask you properly." Rebecca looked down at this man who had broken her heart and then helped her rebuild it stronger. This man who had rescued her from a nightmare and then given her space to rescue herself. This man who loved her student stories and remembered her coffee order and made her laugh until her sides ached. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes to the future, yes to the partnership, yes to building something real together." "And someday?" Julian asked hopefully. "The other question?" Rebecca pretended to consider, even as joy bubbled up inside her. "Ask me again in a year, and we will see." 1 year, Julian agreed, kissing her softly. "I can work with that." They stood together on the terrace as the sun completed its descent, the city lights beginning to sparkle below. Inside, their friends were laughing, sharing food and stories, creating memories. This was not a fairy tale ending, Rebecca thought. It was better. It was real. It was imperfect and complicated and required work every single day. But it was theirs. Built on honesty and trust and the willingness to choose each other, over and over again. A year later, when Julian asked the question properly on another beach under another meteor shower, Rebecca said yes without hesitation. Not because it was safe or predictable, but because it was right. And 6 months after that, when Rebecca Walsh became Rebecca Pierce in a small ceremony surrounded by people who truly loved them, there were no interruptions. No dramatic rescues. No last-minute revelations. Just 2 people who had found their way back to each other, choosing love despite its risks, building a future worth believing in.